Hello, I am Dr. Vidya Patil, serving as Associate Professor of English at Government First Grade Women's College, Bidar. In today's video, we will be trying to read and understand the poem Our Casuarina Tree by Toru Dutt. Toru Dutt is again one of the foremost Indian writers who began to write in English. She is considered to be somebody who paved the path for Indian writing in English. She began her career by writing in prose but is remembered for her poetry. Toru Dutt is one of the most remarkable Indian poets who wrote in the English language. Let us now try to read and understand this poem, Our Casuarina Tree. Our Casuarina Tree by Toru Dutt is a beautiful symbolic poem. The tree reminds Toru Dutt of her childhood. In this poem, the tree is also symbolic of our Indian culture. Before we actually begin reading the poem, let us first try to know something more about Toru Dutt. Toru Dutt is a Bengali poet and translator. She is often called as the first Indian poetess who wrote in French and English. She began publishing her works at a very young age, and she was only 18 years old when she did so. Though she began her literary career by writing prose, she is known more for her poetry. She was not only a poet but also a feminist and someone who wanted to bring about change. She is one of the first Indian writers who paved the way for other great legends to make a mark for themselves in English writing. Her writings and contributions to both the French and the Sanskrit languages are also highly commendable. She has many different publications, among which the most popular ones are A Sheaf Gleaned in French Fields in 1876, Bianca or the Spanish Maiden, which was presented in the form of a serial novel in the Bengal magazine from January to April 1878. Le Journal de Madame Sol is another book of hers which was published after her death. Ancient Ballads and Legends of Hindustan is again another collection of her poetry which was published posthumously, that is after her death in 1882. She has also published translations of French poetry and many other literary articles in the Bengal magazine from March 1874 to March 1877. Some of the most notable publications of her time were included essays on Henry Louis Vivian Desrosiers in December 1874. She has also published various translations from the Sanskrit language, again in the Bengal magazine in October 1876 and in Calcutta Review in January 1877. In addition to all these literary works, she has also written a great many letters. Though Toru Dutt died at a very young age, she continues to remain an exemplary poet. She is considered to be one of the best Indian English writers. Her lyrics usually focus on the complexity of human emotions. Toru Dutt has proved to be a successful combination of both the European and Indian culture. These influences can be seen in the poetic synthesis of the English verse form, particularly the ballad and the Indian legends and inspirations. Despite having a very short life, Toru Dutt has managed to make an impact on Indian English poetry, and her poetry proves to be a testimony of her literary prowess. Let us now try and understand the poem Our Casuarina Tree. The poem Our Casuarina Tree is included in Toru Dutt's collection of poems titled Ancient Ballads and Legends of Hindustan, which was published in 1882. This poem is one of Toru Dutt's most famous poems and describes a tree which was near her home. She associates this tree with her childhood memories and her siblings who are no more. The word R in the title shows that this tree meant something more to her than just being an ordinary tree. It was a part of her life and an integral part of her childhood, which she shared with her siblings. Let us now try to read and understand the first stanza of the poem. The first stanza reads as follows. Like a huge python winding round and round, the rugged trunk indented with scars up to its very summit near the stars, a creeper climbs in whose embraces bound no other tree could live but gallantly. So, in the first few lines of this poem, we find that there is the description of the tree. Though the tree has not been directly described, the poet tries to describe the strength of the tree through the visual of a huge creeper which climbs up the casuarina tree. The tree is quite old and full of nicks and knots, but it stands tall and strong. It wears the creeper like a scarf. The first stanza goes on in the following manner. The giant wears the scarf and flowers are hung in crimson clusters, all the boughs among, whereon all day are gathered bird and bee, and oft at nights the garden overflows with one sweet song that seems to have no close, sung darkling from our tree while men repose. So, the poet says that the tree is covered with crimson flowers as it is the season of flowering. The flowers are scattered across all the branches. Birds and bees are attracted and are hovering around the tree. The tree is in the garden and sings sweetly as the people in the house sleep peacefully. So at night, the tree has a soft tune which acts as a lullaby for the household members. This sweet song seems to have no end, which shows that there is no end to the life of this tree. So this stanza gives us a description of the strength and the gentleness which is combined in this tree. The tree is not only very strong, but at the same time is very gentle towards the inhabitants of that house. So, the tree is here a symbol of relaxation, beauty, springtime, and a new life. Let us now have a look at the second stanza of the poem. When first my casement is wide open thrown, at dawn, my eyes delighted on its rest. Sometimes and most in winter, on its crest, a grey baboon sits statue-like alone, watching the sunrise, while on lower boughs his puny offspring leap about and play. And far and near kokilas hail the day, and to their pastures wend our sleepy cows, and in the shadow, on the broad tank cast by the hoar tree, so beautiful and vast, the water lilies spring like snow enmassed. So, in this particular stanza, the poet is telling us that the first thing that she sees every morning when she opens her window is the beautiful casuarina tree, and she loves this sight. Though the seasons change, the tree always remains constant. In the winter, there is a baboon that sits contemplatively, and the other monkeys play around in the lower branches. The koel birds sing the praises of the morning, and the cows go to their pastures. The giant tree's shadow protects the water lilies and helps them to grow. The tree is never found to be alone, but seems to be always providing rest and protection to others. This stanza shows us that the tree is always in use and is always providing a space to others for relaxation and enjoyment. The memory of the tree fills her with nostalgia and happiness. The poet loves the tree and the fact that the tree supports life. Let us now have a look at the next stanza. The third stanza of the poem reads in this manner. But not because of its magnificence, this dear is the casuarina to my soul. Beneath it we have played, though years may roll, O sweet companions, loved with love intense, for your sakes shall the tree be ever dear. Blent with your images, it shall arise in memory till the hot tears blind mine eyes. What is that dirge-like murmur that I hear, like the sea breaking on a shingle beach? It is the tree's lament and airy speech that haply to the unknown land may reach. So, the poet in the third stanza clarifies that the tree is not loved because of its size, beauty, or strength. These are not the important characteristics of the tree, and its beauty is much more than being skin deep. The casuarina is part of the poet's childhood and is integral to her soul. The tree was the place where she and her siblings used to play and create lovely memories. For the poet, this is not just a casuarina tree, but a time capsule where she can go back and experience the relationships and fun which she had during her childhood along with her siblings. Whenever the poet recalls these memories of the tree, she is reminded of her siblings, and these images bring her tears. This tree represents the strength of the family and the intense love which she felt for her siblings. The mourning of her heart is reflected in the mourning of the tree. There is a lament which is reaching out far and wide, as the tree seems to be remembering the children who used to play around her. The shade and the constancy of that beautiful tree is no longer a part of her life. Those who have passed away from this world are also no more a part of her life. So, both the poet and the casuarina tree are mourning together for the loss of, for this immense loss. The fourth stanza is as follows. Unknown yet well known to the eye of faith, ah, I have heard that wail far, far away, in distant lands by many a sheltered bay, when slumbered in his cave the water breath, and the waves gently kissed the classic shore of France or Italy beneath the moon. When earth lay tranced in a dreamless swoon, and every time the music rose, before mine inner vision rose a form sublime, thy form, O tree, as in my happy prime I saw thee in my own loved native clime. Here, the poet is trying to tell us that the moaning of the tree is a new sound which she had not heard earlier, but she is able to relate with it as it has the same power and strength as she herself used to lament when she was living far away in France and Italy. She used to hear this lament in those distant lands, and this sound used to bring back to her rich memories of her childhood. She could recreate the visual image of the tree which she was used to seeing outside her window, and this used to give her immense happiness. The poet says that her childhood days in that house, where, from where she could see the tree very clearly, was the happiest period in her life. The next stanza, that is the last stanza of this poem, is in this manner. Therefore I fain would consecrate a lay unto thy honor, tree beloved of those who now in blessed sleep for aye repose, dearer than life to me, alas were they. Mayst thou be numbered when my days are done with deathless trees like those in Borrowdale, under whose awful branches lingered pale fear, trembling hope, and death, the skeleton, and time, the shadow. And though weak the verse that would thy beauty fain, O fain rehearse, may love defend thee from oblivion's curse. Thus the poet says that the tree is sacred. The tree was loved by many, both the living as well as the dead. The poet knows that the tree will live longer than her and hopes that it will never be left alone. That she hopes that the tree will find company in similar trees which will live longer than the tree. This tree does not deserve to be forgotten and should be saved from the curse of oblivion. She says that the, the tree should be saved from the curse of disappearing from the face of this earth and from the minds of men. She then goes on to say that just as Wordsworth has made the yew trees memorable in his poems, similarly, she would like if this Casuarina tree would be made memorable and immortal through her poem. The poem Toru Dutt in this poem mentions a quote, fear, trembling hope, and death the skeleton, and time the shadow. This quote has been taken from Yew Trees, a poem which is written by Wordsworth. She says that for her, the Casuarina tree and the memory of her siblings are intertwined. She wants to make these memories and the tree immortal. This love which she has both for her siblings and for the Casuarina tree should help to make this possible. She hopes that her love for the tree will save the tree from being forgotten, and she expresses her desire that the tree is never cursed with oblivion. So, in this manner, we can see that Toru Dutt has managed to write a beautiful poem where she expresses her immense love for her siblings. Now, the central theme of this poem is nothing but the poet's memory of her past and her childhood, which is linked with the Casuarina tree. Even when she went to distant foreign lands, the tree continued to remind her of home. The tree is therefore a symbol of the poet's childhood and her home. The tree is very important to Toru Dutt as she always wants it to be remembered through her poetry. It is used as a symbolic representation of the poet's past memories as well as the rich tradition of Indian culture and philosophy. The Casuarina tree stands for nostalgia, longing, and memory, whereas the trees which she used to see in England reflected her isolation. Toru Dutt underscores the idea of that the poem is nothing but written memory. The poet seeks love from everyone in order to protect the tree and her poem from the ravages of time. Let us now try to understand the form and structure of the poem. Our Casuarina Tree by Toru Dutt is a poem of 55 lines which is divided into 5 stanzas. Each stanza consists of 11 lines. These 11 lines are divided into 2 portions where the first portion is an octave, that is 8 lines, and in the form of a sonnet, this octave is again made up of 2 quatrains which consist of 4 lines each. They are closed rhymes and these 8 lines are then followed by a rhyming tercet. A rhyming tercet, which is nothing but a small stanza consisting of 3 lines, is used to end this sonnet rather than the usual rhyming couplet, that is 2 lines. This style of writing describes the overflowing emotions of the poet towards her childhood memories and the Casuarina tree. The poem is very symbolic in nature, and the representation of the poet's memory, which is associated with the Casuarina tree, has been effectively done by using poetic devices. The use of the subjective pronoun "are" in the title itself suggests that the poem is subjective in tone. In the very first stanza of the poem, the poet describes the creeper's stronghold on the tree and is actually symbolically representing the impact of colonialism on Indian culture and philosophy. This poem uses rich imagery which is presented to us in the description of the tree's appearance, the description of dawn, and the memory of her loved ones who were connected with the tree. Various metaphors and similes have been used in this poem. The metaphor is used in the lines, "The giant wears the scarf, trembling hope, time the shadow." Other examples of similes are "like a huge python," "baboon sits statue-like alone," and "the water lilies spring like snow enmasked." These add beauty to the poem and reinforces the feelings of the poet. Let us now look at some of the other literary devices which have been employed in the poem. Zoomorphism. Zoomorphism is a figurative language which is used to characterize people, objects, places, sometimes even ideas with animal attributes. So, in the very first stanza, we come across the lines, Like a huge python winding round and round, the rugged trunk indented deep with scars. Here, the vine is being, or the creeper is being described in animal terms as a python. We also find the use of personification. Personification is where non-human objects are given human attributes. In the line, the giant wears the scarf and flowers are hung. The tree is referred to as the giant and is treated as a human. We also find the use of similes. Similes are nothing but words where we use words such as like or as in order to compare things. Let us now look at a few examples of the similes used in this poem. A grey baboon sits statue-like alone. Here, the baboon is said to be sitting like a statue. The water lilies spring like snow and mast. Here, the lilies of the spring are being compared to snow, like a sea breaking on a shingle beach. So the trees is being compared to lamenting like the sea. So we can see that in this poem, Toru Dutt has tried to express her views of how the Casuarina tree constantly reminded her of her childhood when she was the happiest. It also reminded her of her siblings who are no more, and she laments the loss of her siblings just as the tree also seems to be lamenting the loss of those happy days. Toru Dutt here, in the end of the poem, wishes that this tree becomes immortal through her poem.